And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo. And all those pesky treasures in the format, am I right? They're all over the place. And I have some pretty interesting ways to deal with them. Now, of course, these ways are not specifically for treasures. They can deal with a lot of other things as well. They're just cards that will deal with treasures and likely some other stuff. In particular, all of the other artifact tokens, like the blood tokens and the, we just have so many of these artifact tokens in the format now, food tokens, and, it seems like they're doing it not every set, but almost on a yearly basis, we get some new artifact token that's doing something. And most of these will deal with all of those. So they're not just for treasure tokens. They can deal with a lot of other stuff as well. But again, not specifically dealing with treasure tokens, but they work. So for example, maybe the best card in the entire format for dealing with treasure tokens or any of those other artifact tokens is March of the Machines. 3 and a blue enchantment. Each non-creature artifact is an artifact creature with power and toughness, each equal to its mana value. So this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about where you wouldn't normally think of this as dealing with artifact tokens, but it does it maybe better than any other card. And the reason why is because, of course, an artifact token like a treasure or, again, blood token, food token, any of those will, because this is a static effect, it'll immediately turn into a creature as it is created. And of course, because of state-based actions, it will then immediately die. So this, better than I think any other card, will immediately make those tokens disappear as they are created, and that individual won't have any time to react, right? As with maybe some of these other ones, they can react to it where I have a bunch of treasure tokens. Oh, you're going to destroy them all? Okay, in response, I can sacrifice them all and actually use the mana, or I can sacrifice my food tokens or my blood tokens or whatever. Here, you have no opportunity. If you create a food token with March of the Machines in play, it will enter the battlefield, and before you actually have an opportunity to pay the 2 mana, let's say, to gain 3 life, it'll already be gone. So this really is the best way to deal with all of those. Another really interesting way to deal with them, another enchantment, one I've talked about on my channel before, Eye of Singularity. It is a world enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, destroy each permanent with the same name, except for basic land. So when this enters the battlefield, it'll deal with treasure tokens. Again, I'll use treasure tokens as the main topic here, even though it covers a lot of other stuff as well. So if there's 20 treasure tokens in play, and it doesn't matter who's using them, and again, this is an effect just like March of the Machines, obviously, that's going to affect you too. So obviously you're not going to want to be the person playing the food tokens, blood tokens, or whatever. This enters the battlefield. All treasure tokens, because of course they all have the same name, will all get destroyed. So that right away covers all of that. Whenever a permanent other than a basic land enters the battlefield, destroy each permanent already in play with that name. So that means as the game continues now, what'll happen is basically you can only have one in play at a time. So someone has a treasure token, and I guess this applies to soul rings and, other stuff that you might have in play at the same time. I mean, this is a really neat card. This is more of an anti-token card. So sapperling tokens or any other kind of token, this works fantastic against. If you have someone cast an Avenger of Zendikar, creating all those plant tokens, they'll all destroy each other. So this shuts down a lot of stuff. It's a really neat card, but particularly against treasure tokens, works really, really well. Someone will create a treasure token. Let's say they got a Smothering Tithe in play. There's a perfect example, right? You don't pay the 2, treasure token gets created. On the next player's turn, they don't pay the 2, creates another treasure token, but it will then destroy the treasure token that came before it. So there can never be more than one treasure token in play, which, that's not very good. One treasure token doesn't accomplish a lot. So this will work really well against those treasure tokens. Very similarly, Layline of Singularity has the same effect, right? Again, these both have the same, you're sort of only allowing one in play at a time. This one does it a little bit differently, but works essentially the same way. 2 blue enchantment. If it's in your starting hand, of course, you can begin the game with it in play. All non-land permanents are legendary. So this, again, does very similar to the same as Eye of Singularity, where when it enters the battlefield, because everything is legendary, you get to keep one. So it's a little bit different. So you actually get to keep one treasure token, or you get to keep one blood token. And again, because of the way the legendary rule works, everyone would get to keep one treasure token, whereas with Eye of Singularity, it would destroy all of them. But as the game goes on, again, because it's legendary, you can only keep one. We all know how the legendary rule works. But again, this is another card that you wouldn't think of it in that regard. You wouldn't think, I'm going to use this to destroy treasure tokens, but it does work to destroy treasure tokens. Another way that we can very easily get rid of treasure tokens is with something that says, like Hugo consumes all, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. So dealing with a certain mana value, and again, because treasure tokens are 0 mana value, and, again, blood tokens and all those other things as well, stuff that targets low mana value will work really, really well, where, maybe you would think to use it, maybe not. This one's a little more obvious because it's hitting mana value 1 or less, so obviously it's going to work great against tokens. A card like Pernicious Deed, an old favorite of mine, will work very similarly and maybe even better. So 1 black and a green enchantment, pay X and sacrifice Pernicious Deed, destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value X or less. So of course, in this case, I can pay 0 and destroy each artifact, creature, enchantment with mana value X or less. And again, this is another one that works fantastically against any token theme. Or you can throw a lot more mana if you want to throw a bunch of things, but you can just pay 0 here. You can just sacrifice this, paying 0 mana, destroy all treasure tokens. Again, in that Avenger of Zendikar scenario, works pretty darn good. Dauntless Dismantler is probably the best, and obviously this card just came out last year and they printed it. I would say likely they printed it just for treasure tokens, or a lot of other those tokens as well. 1 on a white human artificer, 1/4 artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And of course, that being on there makes it work extra well against treasure tokens, because of course you have to tap those treasure tokens to use them. So they will enter the battlefield tapped. Your opponent will be able to use them right away. So, Dockside Extortionist comes down, they create 20 treasure tokens, they're all tapped, they can't use them. And then on your turn, you can just pay 1 white mana and sacrifice your Dauntless Dismantler, destroy each artifact with mana value X, of course, and X is 0. So again, the mana value part, it just makes it a lot easier. I can just pay 1 white mana and sacrifice this guy to destroy all the treasure tokens, blood tokens, food tokens in play, right? This card's fantastic. I try to put it in as many decks as I can. Again, if you're not doing that theme, that's where cards like this kind of get difficult, right? I'll throw Aether Snap there as well. That's another card that I've touted on my channel quite a bit, which obviously works fantastic against all those token themes. The only problem is, you got to not be doing, so many decks are doing token themes now that it's tough to not hit yourself with those symmetrical sort of effects, right? Meltdown is another fantastic one that I mentioned on my channel before. X and a red sorcery, destroy each artifact with mana value X or less. So again, you can pay more into this to destroy more if you want. You pay 2 mana, destroy the soul rings as well. Opponent's got a soul ring, not hard to do, right? But you can just pay X is 0 here, pay 1 red mana to destroy all the treasure tokens, all the blood tokens, all the food tokens, all the map tokens, whatever the case may be. 1 red mana to do that? That seems pretty fantastic, right? How about Corrosion? This is a funny one that I brought up on my channel before. And honestly, I had a back and forth with a few guys in the comments of those videos because, honestly, and I haven't had a clarification on whether or not this works or not. I think it does. Maybe it doesn't. I could be wrong. Maybe you guys can decide in the comments of this video whether or not I'm right about this or not. Either way, it will work. It's just a matter of whether it works really good or just kind of good. So 1 black and a red enchantment has cumulative upkeep 1. So of course, at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an age counter on it and you have to pay 1 for each age counter on it. At the beginning of your upkeep also, so those things both happen at the same time, put a rust counter on each artifact target opponent controls. So again, in Commander, obviously when this card was made, they were just thinking 2-player game here. So in Commander, I pick 1 guy, I put a rust counter on each artifact target opponent controls. Then destroy each artifact with mana value less than or equal to the number of rust counters on it. Artifacts destroyed this way can't be regenerated. And when this leaves the battlefield, remove all rust counters from all permanents. So what I'm claiming here, and I could be wrong, but what I'm claiming here is I pick 1 guy and that guy's got a bunch of artifacts I want to get rid of. I put a rust counter on each artifact he controls, and I think this is a pretty good card. I mean, you do have to pay the cumulative upkeep, but man, maybe in a Gen Arcanum Weaver deck where you can easily just let this go away, not pay the cumulative upkeep, then get it back later if your opponent, again, creates a bunch of treasure tokens or just has a lot of artifacts in play. Pretty neat fit in a deck like that. Now, how I'm claiming that this card works, and I could be wrong, but this is what I think. I put a rust counter on each permanent this player controls. Then you destroy each artifact in play, not by that player. It just says destroy each artifact with mana value less than or equal to the number of rust counters on it. So if all the other players in the game have again, food tokens, blood tokens, treasure tokens, whatever, those are artifacts with a mana value of 0 that have 0 rust counters on them. So it should destroy all the artifact tokens in play. And then plus the 1 mana value things that player has, right? I think. I've had people tell me that's not the case. It doesn't work like that. I honestly don't know. That's my interpretation of the card. Either way, even if it only works on the one person, it is still a pretty neat way to deal with those treasure tokens. Sardinian Avenger, 1 on a red goblin warrior, 1/1 first strike and trample. When it attacks, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X the number of artifacts your opponents control. I suppose that's pretty good if your opponent has a bunch of treasure tokens, and guy's going to get bigger, right? This is a card, again, that's printed recently, and in my opinion, printed specifically to deal with the influx of treasure tokens in the Commander format. And this is another way that we can be dealing with the treasure tokens. You're not destroying them now, but you're punishing your opponents for using them. And for me, that can sometimes be a better way. Like sometimes worse, sometimes not. Some people would say, okay, I'm letting my opponent crack those 20 treasure tokens, so they're getting to do their thing, but they're taking 20 damage. So in a way, it could be better. It depends on the situation. Here, whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, this deals 1 damage to that player. So this is only dealing with opponents. Of course, they don't really do symmetrical effects that much anymore. You know, we're always doing these one-sided effects, which of course means you can very easily put this in any deck. You could be playing a treasure token deck and this card won't hurt you at all. It'll still be really, really good. Of course, deals with all artifacts your opponents control, but against any of those decks, food decks or whatever, seems pretty fantastic, right? Patron of the Nazumi is another way that we can do this. And again, this deals with a lot of different things, but works really, really well against those treasure tokens. 5 black, spirit, 6/6 rat offering. So of course, that means you can sacrifice a rat and cast this guy at instant speed, reducing the mana cost by whatever that rat you sacrificed cost. And so for that reason, I think this is a real easy slot into any rat tribal deck, and I know there's a lot of those out there. Whenever a permanent is put into opponent's graveyard, that player loses 1 life. That's actually a really great ability, and of course works with the treasure tokens and all those other artifact tokens. That's where it can be particularly good. This is actually a great hate card against those strategies. Maybe the best though, far as just going after your opponent's life total, is Magnetic Mind. 4 mana artifact. Whenever another artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, deals 2 damage to that artifact's controller. So again, this is a symmetrical effect. It does work on you too, but if you're not really doing that, this card can be really punishing. 2 damage. If someone's doing 20 treasure tokens, they might not be able to, right? They might end up killing themselves if this guy's in play. This is probably one of the best for punishing your opponents for playing any of those artifact token strategies. Haunting Wind is a really interesting old one. 3 and a black enchantment. Whenever an artifact becomes tapped or a player activates an artifact ability without a tap in its activation cost, Haunting Wind deals 1 damage to that artifact's controller. So this will work with essentially, I know the wording is weird here, but essentially any artifact that is tapping, this will work. So that actually covers a lot, but of course covers all those artifact tokens, and this will deal 1 damage to that artifact's controller. So again, very similar to these other effects that I'm talking about. So this is another one. And again, in black, where maybe you don't have a lot of great options, this is one that will work there. Another thing we can do is just draw a bunch of cards off of our opponents when they're doing that. Vidiian Revel. This is a card that has gotten a lot better in the format over the last few years. Again, a card I've talked about on my channel a few times. 1 green enchantment. Whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. Anytime someone sacrifices a treasure token in a commander game, you get to draw a card. I have this in my Questing Beast deck just because why not? I just throw it in there. I always draw lots of cards off of it. Always. Again, there's treasure tokens or blood tokens or clue tokens or whatever. I'm drawing a card off of every single one. Just played this in a game recently. Drew like 7 cards off of it. I'm never sorry to see this thing in play. So you're not destroying treasure tokens. You're not going after your opponent's life total for playing them. But it is a pretty great option for all those artifact token strategies out there. You're going to get a huge benefit off of it. There you go, a whole bunch of great ways to hate on treasure tokens in the Commander format. And obviously a lot of these cards, given particular situations, will work in a lot of other situations as well. Obviously, Pernicious Deed is just great at, getting things off the board, whether it be permanents of any type. Eye of Singularity works great against any token strategy. There's some great suggestions for you for your decks, though, if you are particularly sick and tired of all the treasure tokens in the format. You guys let me know if you're playing any of these cards in the Commander format already. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.